Hi, David Rosenberg here for the Psychopharmacology Institute. In this CAP, or Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Smart Take, we're going to examine whether early non-response in adolescents with first episode psychosis predicts longer-term non-response and non-remission. Key issue, right? Because we know that if a patient ultimately doesn't respond at 12 weeks or longer to an antipsychotic medicine that proves to be ineffective, that not only have we quote unquote wasted time or delayed the adolescent's opportunity to get better, but we've also exposed that particular child or adolescent to a medication they ultimately didn't need and exposing them to the side effects, which for antipsychotic medication is not insignificant. The study here was done very well and really evaluated a clinically important question in 84 patients. And while this was a post hoc analysis, that means this was an ongoing study and the investigators decided to look at this set of data after the effect. So they didn't hypothesize a possible difference or relationship between early antipsychotic non-response and later non-response. They just after working in the area decided that this was an important area to study. And I agree with them. And it actually built on the tolerability and efficacy of antipsychotic study or trial called TEA, which was a trial at 7 different sites across Denmark, which compared oral extended release quetiapine and aripiprazole in adolescents less than 18 years of age who were having their first episode of psychosis. What's really cool about this study is it's actually the first study in adolescents with first episode psychosis to evaluate whether early non-response to antipsychotics at week 2 and 4, could that predict non-response and non-remission at week 12? And this is something that has been done in adults, but to date has really been somewhat overlooked in adolescents. So clearly a critical need. And what the authors found in this particular study was that symptom improvement occurred most commonly within the first 2 weeks of treatment. So those adolescents with first episode psychosis who were most likely to experience and demonstrate long-term response and improvement on an antipsychotic, in this case, either aripiprazole or extended release quetiapine. Some response was noted in the first 2 weeks. And if patients did not respond within the first 2 weeks, they were much less likely to have responded by 12 weeks. And the most robust finding was that early non-response by week 4 of treatment with either extended release quetiapine or aripiprazole reliably predicted non-response and non-remission at week 12. So this is a big finding, right? Because it's showing us that there may be clues very early on to help us identify who the non-responders are, being able to identify non-response to antipsychotic medication in first episode adolescents with psychosis is critical because that means we can make, if with that knowledge, quicker decisions in terms of changing treatment. So we don't keep a patient on medication they won't find effective, that won't help them longer than is necessary, so their symptoms go unabated. And it also decreases the threat and risk of keeping them on prolonged medication that's not going to be effective and thus still exposing them to adverse events, to side effects. So it's really a win-win. Find out early that this is not likely to be a medicine that's going to help, and at best you may get side effects, but it's not likely to be effective, and thereby you can make an earlier switch to another antipsychotic rather than sticking with an antipsychotic that after 2 to 4 weeks wasn't effective, and now this data is suggesting by 12 weeks it will no longer be effective. There were a couple of other interesting, intriguing findings in this particular study, namely that higher psychosocial disability and lower suicidality was actually observed in early non-responders compared with early responders. So these are more clues of things that we can look for as we attempt to predict beforehand and then in real time who's more or less likely to respond to a particular antipsychotic, and when is the right time to say, look, this is not likely to be effective. Now, it's important that patients who receive an antipsychotic receive that antipsychotic at a sufficiently high dose. You need to monitor compliance before deeming a person a non-responder. So we can't just say that for any reason at all, the patient hasn't responded within 2 weeks, therefore it's impossible that they'll respond to a particular antipsychotic. We have to look at other things. Have they been compliant with the medicine? Are they actually taking the medicine? Are they taking the medicine as prescribed? Are they taking too little? Are they taking too many pills? There are a whole number of variables. What are the other non-medication, non-pharmacological approaches being used that can be helpful as well? So, for example, we know in psychosis that a high expressed emotion in the family environment can make relapse and treatment response less likely. So that means that if there's a lot of stress and negative emotion in the family environment of a psychotic adolescent or adult, that may hinder the medicine's efficacy. So there are a number of variables to consider, but taking this all together, I think it's a powerful paper and new approach because it really suggests that at least for aripiprazole and extended release quetiapine, that if it's been an adequate 2 and particularly an adequate 4-week treatment trial at the right dose, and the patient is taking the medicine and all other factors are equal, and there's no response, there's strong suggestion from this paper that strong consideration of a new antipsychotic is probably warranted. So this is one of those studies that I believe has real clinical utility and is something for the active clinician practicing to have in their armamentarium, that 2-4 weeks, no response, not a significant response to quetiapine or aripiprazole, then it's time to consider another antipsychotic, as the likelihood of getting a response later is very unlikely, particularly since symptom improvement occurred most commonly within the first 2 weeks of treatment. So this is a contrast to treatment with the SSRIs and antidepressants, where we know that you may not experience symptom improvement early on, and it may take 6 or 8 weeks and sometimes longer. Here, this data really suggests for first episode adolescents with psychosis that 2 to 4 weeks is a good benchmark to determine go, no go going forward.